Once again, the Empower series is in town, making a difference and changing lives. Come on down, be a part of the festivities and this major event to impact and make a difference. What you'll learn in the process is finding your personal goals and objectives, what you need to do and what you want to do in life. Number 2, networking event. Remember, your net worth will always be a reflection of your network. And number 3, find out cutting-edge ideas, what the next generation is doing to improve not only lives, but our community as well. All right, sit down. All right. You stood up, now sit down.
Okay, you
got it. Wow, what are you doing on a Saturday morning? I'm probably the last individual to interview John Johnson. John Johnson, as you know, the founder of Ebony Magazine. And this man, I got a chance to interview him twice over the course of my research. And there I am, he gave me an hour of his time, 820 Michigan Avenue in Chicago, up on the 12th floor. And we were talking about success, leadership, and achievement, and he said, you know, you don't have to go around the country interviewing folks, blah, blah, blah. It's really easy when you want to talk about leadership. He said, leadership is really about a relay race. I said, Mr. Johnson, what in the world are you talking about? He said, a relay race isn't won or lost on how fast the runners are. A relay race is won or lost on how capable one runner can pass the baton from one to the next. You can have the 4 fastest runners in the world, but if they haven't mastered that skill of passing that baton, you can forget winning the race. And he went on to say, in Black America, we got many fast runners. In lane number 1, we got Oprah Winfrey. Lane number 2, Colin Powell, blah, 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 on and on. Now, come around the final turn, coming down the straightaway, and we have to make sure that the next generation is fit, focused, ready to run the race of their lives. Now, you can always judge, you can always gauge how well you are doing in life by how you respond to the following question. How many organizations, how many businesses, how many enterprises, how many companies have tried to hire you away from your present employer? You can gauge how well you're doing. People try to hire me away from CAU, and let me tell you why I am at Clark Atlanta. Because I get a chance to teach some of the best and brightest students in the country. Case in point, I got 2 right here with me right now. Jerica and Jamie, come on down here.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I taught these 2 little corn muffins years ago. And just like the picture behind me, they wore the red polo. Where's your red polos, girls?
Well, they didn't have them with me. They still have me. I was the season before that.
You still got it?
Yeah.
Introduce yourself and tell folks what are you doing.
Okay, hi, I'm Jerica Burnham. I just moved back to Dallas. I was living in Atlanta for like 8 or 9 years. I was working at Ernst & Young accounting firm, and now I'm working for a company called Workiva.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Jenkins. I was an educator, then I coached educators, and now I have my own consulting company working with education institutions, and I also have a nonprofit focused on leadership development for African American students.
Wow. Thank you very much, ladies. You talked about success. I was just interviewed outside, and they asked me my definition of success. What is success? Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal, a worthy ideal. It's got nothing to do with money, unless that's part of your goal to make money. And I don't go around the country telling people, you got to be a millionaire, you got to be an entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not me. As I shared yesterday in a presentation, my books aren't about cash. My books are about courage. It takes courage to chase your dream. It takes courage to forsake today for tomorrow. It takes courage to find a new set of friends because your personal friends right now don't empower you. So what is success and how can you attain it? When I got my fancy PhD degree from Northwestern University, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I certainly knew what I didn't want to do. Number 1, I didn't want to go in the corporate world. Though I did do that for 12 years, and I am so glad that I did it because I didn't know nothing. Dallas is really home for me. Why? Because when I finished undergrad, University of Oklahoma, I was the first black male in the LPD program for Texas Instruments and lived in Richardson. And from there, I went on to SmithKline of French Pharmaceuticals, and my last 3 years in the corporate world, I was a consultant. Number two, I didn't even want to teach. And what in the world do you do with a PhD from North? Yeah, I teach, and I'm fulfilled by it. But all I wanted to do, I wanted to find the answers to two questions. Question number one, why does one person succeed while another fails? And question number two, why is one individual rich and wealthy while another is impoverished? So what did I do? I carved out a list of 150 individuals. The list grew well past 150. They didn't know me, but I certainly knew them. I was going to meet them and interview them, trying to ascertain the answers to those questions. For the most part, you name them, I probably interviewed them over a 30-year period. I found 4 common chords in all these men and women. Number one, they dreamed big dreams. They had a dream. They had a passion, something they desperately wanted to accomplish in life. What am I telling you, Dallas? I'm telling you, nothing can defeat the passionate, committed mind. The passionate, committed mind cannot be defeated. If the passionate, committed mind could be defeated, I wouldn't be here. Oprah Winfrey wouldn't be here. There'd be no Bob Johnson. There'd be no Bill Gates. There'd be no Steve Jobs. I used the example yesterday. Okay, you got Kodak. Kodak came up with the digital camera. Kodak comes up with the digital camera in the 1990s, 140,000 employees, a market cap of more than 24 billion. Less than 10 years later, Kodak goes bankrupt. They invented the digital camera. You've got a digital camera right back there. They go bankrupt. And at the same time that Kodak goes bankrupt in 1998, 13 passionate, committed souls in Silicon Valley take the same idea and come up with Instagram, market cap of $6 billion. Passionate, committed mind can't be defeated. So what makes the passionate, committed mind? Look, damn it, a burning desire. We got 50 million different desires. I got a different desire. Well, it's about time for me to trade my Lexus in, go get another car. My wife wants a complete makeover on that. Got 50 million different desires. But there's a big difference between a desire and a burning desire. What's a burning desire? A burning desire is an inner candle. It's an inner flame that cannot be extinguished. And though the worst may go before you, doubters may come, critics may come, naysayers may come, non-believers, underachievers, they will laugh, they will ridicule, they will scoff, and what will you do? You will use their cynicism, you will use their doubt to propel you forward. It can't be defeated. Number two, they were inner directed versus outer directed. In other words, they weren't so quick to believe well-meaning friends or family members who said, you can't do this, you can't do that. They walked to a beat of a different drummer. As Henry David Thoreau said, don't die with your music left in you. Now, when I was in college as an undergrad, what did my frat brothers call me? They called me the professor. I wanted to teach. I knew I was going to be a college professor one way or another. They called me I always had a book under my arm. Oh, where's Kimbro? He's in the library, he's in lab. He's always reading something. I was like the walking Google. There is, he knows, blah, blah, blah. Why? I was so inquisitive. I was inner directed versus outer directed. Every time, I was bent on the world. What would the old rappers say? Too short. It's been way too long. Time for the world to play your song. Well, every time that I step in my classroom, I'm playing my song. This is my music. You are blessed to live in a country that will reward that. Why? We live in a country that rewards differentiation. Capitalism is not a dirty word. Capitalism means that everything is for sale. That's all it means. You take the word capitalism and write it on a piece of paper, C-A-P-I-T-A-L-I-S-M. Take the Latin derivative of the word capitalism, caput, C-A-P-U-T. Well, what does caput mean in Latin? It means head. What's the one thing you must use in order to survive in a free and open society?
Your head.
Your head. We don't live in a society that's divided between rich versus poor, black versus white, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, male versus female, have versus have not. No. But we do live in a society that is divided between dreamer versus non-dreamer. And people get in trouble in life not because they wanted too much. You'll get in trouble in life because you settled for too little. Inner directed versus outer directed. So what do we know about leadership? 2 requirements of leadership. Number 1, the price of leadership is always loneliness. When you're in charge of your life, you're a leader. The worst mistake you can ever make in life is to think that somebody else signed your paycheck. Now, a month ago, I was out in the Bay Area. Merritt College brought me in. It was the 51st anniversary of the creation of the Black Panthers. And we started talking about social economic systems. And they were asking me, you know, you still got folks leaning on socialism. You got folks running away with utopia. You got folks criticizing capitalism and everything. And I said, the best system for you is the system that allows you to take full responsibility for your life. Full responsibility of your life. What did Martin Luther King say? Martin Luther King said, your life is officially over the day you begin to talk about, think about, discuss everything that doesn't matter. Now, I spoke to a bunch of high schoolers before we left yesterday, and I told them, I said, when Mark Zuckerberg came out with Facebook, when Chad Hurley came out with YouTube, when Reid Hoffman came out with LinkedIn, when Kevin Systrom came out with Instagram, when Jack Dorsey came out with Twitter, they came out with those social media platforms hoping that somebody in your generation, millennials, will get excited, use it, and there's a little girl in Johannesburg, find a way to get her a school uniform so she'll be allowed in class. When they came out with those social media platforms, they thought that somebody in your generation would use it so somebody in Bangladesh could have adequate drinking water and survive another day. But the one thing they didn't come up with those social media platforms for you to get online and gossip. You're repeating the trend again. And that's not me, that's Harriet Tubman. What did Harriet Tubman say? A journalist ran up to her in her later years and Miss Tubman, I want to write an article, I want to chronicle your achievements. She waved them off. There's no need to write an article about me. Yes, it's true. I did lead 860 slaves to freedom. But I could have freed thousands more had they only known they were slaves. So what are you a slave to? Be inner-directed versus outer-directed. The price of leadership is always loneliness. And number 2, you can never be concerned what other people think, say, or do. You can't. You can't. You can't. Where the hell ideas come from? An idea comes from your creator, knocking on your subconscious, asking you, do you want more out of life? God can only do for you what you allow him to do through you. He's the electricity, but baby girl, you're the lamp. When are you going to cut the light switch on? And you can play around with this all you want if you live the normal life. Put male and female together. Normal life, 77 years on earth. Do the calculus. That equates to 30,000 days on earth. Baby girl, that's all you get. Time is not running out, but your life is. So here's the entrepreneurial question, Dr. Kimbro. What are you going to do with the rest of life you have left? I'm just curious. Got the keys to the car. Where are you driving? Number 3, they dedicate themselves to lifelong learning. And it is so fortuitous we are in a library. Everybody at Clark Atlanta knows my classroom. Well, I got a sign on my door, right by my door. That reads, if you don't want to work hard, you don't belong here. And if you don't want to lead, under no circumstances, walk through my door. Then, if you got the guts, if you got the power, you got the courage, you got the temerity to walk in my class, you take 5 steps, and there's another sign on the wall that reads, mediocrity is not the standard in this class. Now, you can be mediocre someplace else, but you can't be mediocre here. Well, I got another sign, I got a 3rd sign in that classroom that reads, if you don't read, if you don't study, if you don't grow, if you don't develop, if you don't go to the seminars, if you don't go to conferences, if you don't take good notes, somebody out in the universe will. And the day you meet that other person, guess what? You lose. I tell my students all the time, fall in love with your English teacher, fall in love with your librarian. Because what I found out in my research, forget all the interviews that I had. All you got to do is look at my 5th book, a 7-year study on black millionaires. I had 6 focus groups around the country. If you weren't African American and you weren't 7 figures, really no need for us to talk. And what did I find out about these men and women? All avid readers. I remember I had a focus group one time. This guy was worth $40 million. I said, how in the world did you build your business? He said, simple. I said, what? How did you do it? He said, I outread the other guy. So what do we know? You can ask any sociologist, psychologist, and they will tell you about E to E ratio. What in the world is E to E ratio? It is education to entertainment. What is the ratio? Well, the average American, the ED ratio is 50 to 1. In other words, for every $1 that they spend in education, educating the inside of the head, they'll spend $50 on entertainment. Going to the club, having a few drinks, playing video games, kicking it, hitting the streets with their boo, no problem. You know what it is in the black community? It's 200 to 1. Do you hear what I said, Black America? I said it's 200 to 1. So you know what that tells me as a college professor? That tells me that you are serious. That tells me you are dead serious. That tells me you are so serious about not being serious. 200 to 1. The bigger the house, the more personal books they have in their personal library. The smaller the house, the bigger the flat screen TV. All you got to do, what are the rich? What are the powerful? Those folks going somewhere, the hopeful, the game changers, the peak performers, what are the images that they focus on? They think about strength, they think about going somewhere. They think about doing something. They think about growth. They think about development. They think about going somewhere and doing something in life. What are the poor? What are the hopeless? The downtrodden, lack, scarcity. What do they think about? They think about, oh, woe is me. They think about, I'll never be able to do that. They think about the two words, I can't. You are a mental being. You're a mental being. That's all it is. I mean, we are a spiritual being with a physical presence. And what does the Bible say? The Bible says, don't desecrate the altar. What in the world does it mean? Don't bring those negative thoughts to my mind. Change the data on the diskettes. I found seven laws that these millionaires focusing on. They don't do it on a daily basis. They do it on a weekly basis. And the first one, prosperity begins in the mind but ends in the purse. And then last but not least, it's men and women flat out refuse to fail. Now, I'm not saying they didn't fail. Many of them actually failed their way to success. I'm living proof of that. It took me 7 years to write my first book, Think and Grow With Your Black Choice. 7 years of financial hell and high water. And when I say hell and high water, I mean hell and high water. My wife was an accountant, 3 children, lived off of her earnings. Stole money away from her, blah, 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 so I could go ahead, airline tickets, blah, blah, go all around the country interviewing these folks. Financial hell and high water. 5 times almost lost my house. Did have 2 cars repossessed. Can't begin to stand here and tell you at times lights, gas, water, electricity was cut off. I got intimate with the group on Thursday, and I told them that the second time that my water was cut off, I lied to my oldest daughter. Anybody ever have the water cut off? In DeKalb County, they do it a second time. They put a $65 surcharge on your bill. Couldn't even afford to pay the bill. How am I going to pay $65 extra? Second time the water was cut off, it was cut off on a Friday. It wasn't returned back on until Tuesday. My oldest daughter came home. She was a sophomore in high school. She gets a glass, puts it under the water faucet, blah, blah, blah. I was home. Dad, well, the water, something's wrong. And I looked that child in the eye and I lied to her because I wasn't man enough for the job. I said, oh, sweetheart, don't worry. They're working on the pipes outside. Everybody that we're enamored with, everybody that we look up to, all the game changers, all the peak performers, well, at one point in their life, they were ridiculed. At one point in life, they were doubted. You see, it's called grit. And what is persistence? Persistence is the level of belief that you have in yourself. Now, here's the good news about persistence. You're the only individual who keeps score. You are the only individual who keeps score. And you're looking at these 3, there's great case studies, folks who I interviewed. Over on the far right, that's Bob Johnson, BET. What the hell do you know about Bob Johnson, BET? When he launched BET, he knew he wasn't going to be on the air unless he had a major advertiser, unless he had a major sponsor. So no matter where Bob Johnson was, he would always fly back to Chicago once or twice a month, fly back to O'Hare, rent a car at O'Hare Airport, drive to Oak Brook, Illinois, and sit in the lobby of the McDonald's headquarters waiting for anybody to come out of the advertising department or come out of marketing so he could pitch BET to. Who's the woman in the middle? For those of you from Chicago, that's Michelle Hoskins, Hoskins syrup. Jamie, she's a school teacher. Her family had a recipe for honey maple syrup, and everybody passed on it. No one did anything with it. It went back to her great-great-grandmother, who was an ex-slave, who prepared this syrup for her master and passed that recipe on. I mean, don't worry about opportunity. Everybody sooner or later drops the ball with opportunity, but she was going to capitalize on it. You doubt me? 3 times Bill Gates had an opportunity to buy Wikipedia and said no. How the world are you going to say no to Wikipedia, 3rd largest website in the world? 3 times Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Netflix and said no. Are you on crack? Netflix? Blockbuster? 3 times Oakley Sunglasses had an opportunity to sell their sunglasses line to Phil Knight of Nike Shoes and said no. And Phil Knight said, I'm going to ask you one last time. He said, no, it's not for sale. You know what Phil Knight said? I'm officially your competitor. Now, after this little session, go home, watch college football Sunday, watch pro football, and look at the shields that they wear. At one time, that had the Oakley logo. Now it's got the Nike swoosh. So don't worry about that. So Michelle Hoskins said, no, I'm capitalizing on this opportunity. She knew that she would not be in business if she didn't have a major account. What did she do every Monday morning at 10 o'clock for 2 straight years? She called Denny's. I was about to say something else. She called Denny's. 10 o'clock every Monday morning for 2 straight years, wore Denny's out. And what did she become in the process? She became Walmart's first minority distributor. And then last but not least, you're looking over here, come to Clark, Atlanta, visit Clark, Atlanta, go to the multipurpose room, and the name of the multipurpose room was Juanito Barranco Multipurpose Room. But this story's not about Juanita Barranco, it's about her husband. Her husband is Greg Barranco, spoke twice in my class. Who in the world is Greg Barranco? Well, here's a young black guy. He's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, gets his bachelor's degree in business administration, walks across the stage, gets a degree. 5 seconds after gets his degree, goes down to the #1 car dealership in Baton Rouge, which is Audubon Ford. Because since 8 years old, he had one dream, one vision. He wanted to sell cars. And back then, do the calculus, we are going back in years, Audubon Ford at one time wouldn't allow blacks in the showroom. If you bought a car from Audubon Ford, you were African American, you had to buy it out on the parking lot. And here comes Greg Barranco with his fancy degree in business administration. He has a resume in one hand, stands on the parking lot waiting for the sales manager to come out, extends his hand and says, good afternoon, my name is Greg Barranco and I'm here to help you sell cars. Salesman looked at him and said, young man, you're in the wrong place. And we don't have any opportunities for you. He said, no problem. 24 hours later, goes back to Audubon Ford, stands in the parking lot, waiting for the sales manager, got another resume. Hi, my name is Greg Barranco, and I'm here to sell cars. Didn't I see you yesterday? Yeah. What did I tell you yesterday? That you didn't have any opportunities. Well, I was just thinking that something might have changed overnight, and I didn't want to miss out. Look, he did it for 30 straight days. 30 straight days, so they dropped and hired him. That record stands right now. He sold more cars in 30 days. He broke the all-time record. Now, what is he now? I mean, how many Mercedes-Benz dealerships do you have across the world? This guy's in the top 10. Buckhead, Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, Georgia. So why would I show you those 3 little case studies? Are you persistent? Are you? And what do we know about persistence? Well, sometimes it's risky not to take a risk. What are the ideas, what are the visions that you are holding in your mind, but you lack the courage, you lack the fortitude, you lack the temerity to blast out and break forward? Well, let me just give you the data, sports fans. The average individual in our society gets 4 ideas a year, any one of which, if you did have the courage, if you did have the fortitude, would make you financially independent. Would make you financially independent. What else do we have over here? A couple more, and we're going to wrap this bad boy up. It is a Saturday morning. What do we know about Steve Jobs and what do we know about Martin Luther King? Hold dear to your values. Hold dear to your values. Now, these two individuals, as I share in my 5th book, use the same marketing strategy to reach their goals and objectives. Did you know that? Martin Luther King, April 28, 1963, March on Washington. More than 250,000 people showed up for that march. 1/4 of them were white. King didn't have a pager. King didn't have a website. King didn't have a smartphone. He had none of that. All he had was word of mouth and flyers. 21 different ways to market or sell a product or service, and he used number 1 and 2. He used word of mouth and he used flyers. That's all he used. April 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs' introduction of the iPhone. And what was the marketing strategy? Number 1, tell me where we are. Number 2, tell me where we can be. And number 3, make it that way. So Martin Luther King, tell me where we are. Well, this country wrote a black man a check that came back marked insufficient funds. Steve Jobs, tell me where we are. Well, if you're like me, you got 50 million electronic devices. You got a phone, you got an MP3 player, you got a Palm Pilot. Hey, got a pager, whatever. Okay, tell me where we are. Number 2, tell me where we can be. Dr. King, tell me where we can be. But I had a dream that my 4 children would be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Steve Jobs, tell me where we can be. Well, I know we got 50 million different devices, but you know what? I called a meeting, and I called my designers, and I called my engineers, and I called my systems analysts. I said, you know, what would be good if we could take all these devices and put them on one particular device? Number 3, make it that way. Martin Luther King, free at last, thank God Almighty. We're free at last. Steve Jobs, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the iPhone. Now, what in the world does that have to do with your values? Those 250,000 individuals, they didn't come to Washington, D.C. because Martin Luther King wanted them to. They came to Washington, D.C. because they wanted to. There's Steve Jobs with the introduction of the iPhone. You had individuals across this country in the middle of the winter, in the pouring rain, 3 o'clock in the morning, standing in line outside of an AT&T store so they could be the first in their office to say, look what I got. They didn't do that because Steve Jobs wanted them to. They did that because they wanted to. So what's the bottom line? People don't care about you until they realize how much you care about them. I tell my students all the time, show me somebody standing on the street corner with a cardboard sign, I will work for food, man, you got just as much opportunity as Bill Gates. You got just as much opportunity as Oprah Winfrey. Dr. Kimbro, you crazy, man. No, because anybody can wow the customer. Anybody can do more than expected, more than what is required. Anybody can go the extra mile. Look, what's the number 1 rule of marketing? What is the number 1 rule of marketing? We got entrepreneurs in here. Well, what's the number 1 rule of marketing? The number 1 rule of marketing, make my eyeballs move. Will you make my eyeballs move? I don't like that. I don't like that. Nah, I'm not feeling that. Definitely ain't feeling that. Now this I like. This looks sharp. I like. Y'all got some more of this? If you got this, we can talk. 21 different ways to market or sell a product or service. You're an entrepreneur, what are you using? I told you, number 1 is word of mouth, number 2 are flyers. What's number 21? Internet. What's number 20? TV. What's number 19? Radio. What's number 18? Segmenting magazines. It took Essence Magazine more than 20 years to reach a subscriber level of 1 million subscribers. It took them 20 years. Took Oprah Winfrey 18 months. Because Oprah asked the question that Essence didn't ask. Do you want all the black women to read Essence magazine? Or do you want all the black women to read Essence, Redbook, McCall's, Vanity Fair, Cosmopolitan magazine? So Dr. Kimbro, what in the world are you saying as we wrap that up? Talking about your values, Harry Belafonte, a man who walked arm in arm, side by side with Martin Luther King. When they asked him about Colin Kaepernick, and what did Harry Belafonte say? He said, I live out here in Hollywood. And he says, the average athlete, the average entertainer, the average celebrity out here in Hollywood, what's the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning? They call their accountant to see how much money they have. Well, when I wake up in the morning, the first phone call I make, I call Nelson Mandela. He said, now who's going to lead a more fulfilling life? What are your values? Speaking of values and speaking of customer service, probably the best example. And I know some of you may have heard it before, but listen, the question begs asking, and we can't hone in on this case study enough. I spent a better part of the day with this woman. Unfortunately, I can see by the eyes, some of you don't even know who she is, Osceola McCarty. Who in the world is Osceola McCarty? Well, let's revisit this case study. She was a little black woman in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who took in the wash of everybody in the community. And she did that for 80 years, more than 80 years. And over the course of 80 years of work, every week, she would make her daily deposits from taking in the wash. She'd charge a nickel for a little boy's shirt, maybe a dime for a little girl's dress, 25 cents for sheets, a nickel for pillowcases. And everybody laughed at little old Ossie McCarthy. Girl, what you doing washing those people's clothes? You can't find something else better to do? Started working at age 8, didn't quit till she was 84 years old. And every week she would go down to the bank and drop off her, her little daily deposits. Did that for almost 80 years. Until one day she gets a phone call from a banker. And the banker says, Miss McCarty, as a senior level vice president at this bank, I am obligated to ask you the following question. It's no secret, you do have a sizable investment at our institution, but the question begs asking, what do you want done with the resources in the untimely nature of your death? And there was a pause on the phone. And the banker could sense, Ms. McCarty, you haven't even thought about that. And then he asked, Ms. McCarty, do you even know how much money you have saved in more than 80 years? She said, no, please tell me. He said, more than $250,000. And there was another pause on the phone. And he sensed, she doesn't even have the idea of the net worth and value of $250,000. He said, Ms. McCarty, end the conversation. Do me a big favor. Come by my office next week so we can take up this conversation a little bit more. I want you to think about this for the next couple of days. Next week comes along, Osceola McCarty goes down to the bank. And she walks into that office of that banker. And that banker says, Ms. McCarty, I got 10 dimes on my desk. And these dimes represent your money. And when I point to one of those dimes, you tell me what portion of your money you want done with your earnings. She says, fine. He points to the first dime. She says, well, I want you to give that portion to my church. I love my pastor. I love my church members. I don't want them to be without. He said, fine. Points to the next 2 dimes. And she says, well, I never got married. I never had any children. But I do have 2 nephews, and I want them to be taken care of when I'm gone. He says, fine. And then he points to the following 7 dimes, and she says, I know exactly what I want you to do with that money. He says, sure. He says, send it to the school in town. He said, what school? He said, the University of Southern Mississippi. He said, a school that you were barred from attending because of your race? She says, yeah. So the next week, they send the bulk of her earnings over to the development office at the University of Southern Mississippi with a handwritten note from Osceola McCarty that read, please give this money to worthy and deserving black college students who still possess the ability to dream. Well, when word got around throughout the world that this little washerwoman gave away every dime that came by her hand, everybody across the globe was matching that scholarship. Ted Turner, the founder of CNN News, TBS, he called a press conference in Atlanta. He said, if that woman can give away the bulk of her earnings, I can at least give away $1 billion. She didn't get a letter. She got a phone call from then President Bill Clinton begging her to come up to Washington, D.C. He said, Ms. McCarty, I got to bestow on you the highest honor I can give to a private citizen. Scared to death of flying, she takes the train from Hattiesburg to Washington, D.C. Here is an individual who never spent a night in a hotel room in her life. For the first time in her life, she spends a night in Washington, D.C. in a hotel room. But before she checks out the next morning, she makes up the bed before she goes. Press club, they got a luncheon for her in her honor. Journalist runs up to her and says, Ms. McCarty, how's it feel being a philanthropist? She says, what is that? Well, she goes back home to Mississippi, and the Clarion Ledger writing an article on the local hero. And one of the writers says, Ms. McCarty, you have enabled the dreams of so many. Do you have a dream? And she said, yes, I have a dream, but I don't know if the Lord gonna let me see it. He says, please share it with the readers. So, well, I just have a dream. I just hope the Lord lets me be here long enough where I can see the first beneficiary of my scholarship. Less than 4 months later, Osceola McCarty sits in the front row at commencement, University of Southern Mississippi. And this is the picture that the development office sent me. I got it proudly displayed in my study at home. Who in the world are you looking at? You're looking at Stephanie Bullock. Who was little Stephanie Bullock? She was a business student, honor student, come from a little small town in Mississippi, town so small, doesn't even appear on most state maps. She walks across the stage and receives her degree as the first Osceola McCarty scholarship recipient. Less than 90 days later, Osceola McCarty makes her transition. And that writer who was writing the article hunts Stephanie Bullock down and says, Miss Bullock, your benefactor is gone. She has passed on. Do you have any comments for our readers? And Stephanie Bullock strokes her chin and says, yes, I do have a comment. Please share it with our readers. She said, heaven couldn't have gained a better angel. Now, why in the world would we discuss this case study? Boys and girls, men and women, this thing is about service. Remember I said John Johnson passing the baton? How are you going to make it better because you were here? That's a critical question. I didn't choose to be here and you didn't choose to be here. Look, the bottom line, you were chosen. So when are you going to place your fingerprints on life and prove you were here? When are you going to make a difference? There's only 4 things in life you want to do. Number 1, you want to make a difference. Number 2, you want to make a difference with somebody else who wants to make a difference. Number 3, you want to make a difference with somebody else who wants to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference. But number 4, you want to make a difference with others who want to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference at a time when it makes all the difference in the world. This is the time. And how do you do that? Through service. Through service. Service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy. As a matter of fact, that's the formula for wealth. Q plus MA equals C. The quality of your service plus the quantity of your service plus the mental attitude in which it is rendered always equals compensation. Always equals compensation. Service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy. And I don't care if you're an entrepreneur. You know, don't let the nice customer ruin your business. Dr. Kimbro, what in the world are you talking about? See, the nice customer will go to the restaurant and wait for his or her order to be taken while the waiter's on the phone talking to his buddies. A nice customer will do that. The nice customer will sit at the table, drink the red wine when she specifically asks for white. A nice customer will do that. The nice customer will eat the well-done steak when she requested rare. A nice customer will do that. But the nice customer never comes back. Never comes back. So don't come running up to me when you get the order. No, you come up to me when you get the reorder. And if you didn't get the order or the reorder, well, doggone it, I need to know why you didn't get it. Service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy. Well, let's wrap this up. If you ever come to Clark, Atlanta, come to my office. My door is always cracked. People ask me, well, when are office hours? All the professors, we got to announce, we got to put it out there, office hours. But if I'm on campus, I always got office hours. You can come on in. No biggie. If you walk into my office and I'm not in my office, no problem. You can just, leave and you can wait in another section of the B school. But before you leave my office, we think green. Make sure you cut the lights out. Now, what's the last image your eyeballs are going to see when you turn the lights out in my office? By the light switch, I got a picture of my icon. That's Kimbro. Who's your icon? Why are you at Clark, Atlanta? Well, my personal icon is W.B. Du Bois, America's most prolific African-American writer, scholar. He taught at Atlanta University. As a matter of fact, economics students walk into his class for 3 years that he was at Atlanta University. He was also university chaplain. And economics majors, they would walk in this class, think they're going to discuss supply and demand, net present value, elasticity. The boys wouldn't have any of that. He'd pick up his Bible and he would read scripture for an hour. That's my icon. And I'm not telling these stories. I have no problem sharing that. If you ask Henry Louis Gates up at Harvard, say, Skip, who's your icon? Tell you W.B. Du Bois. Go to Georgetown, sit down with Michael Eric Dyson. Mike, who's your icon? W.B. Du Bois. Go to Princeton, sit down with Cornell West. Cornell, who you want to be like? Man, Doc, I want to be just like the boys, man. So I got a picture of the boys. And under that picture by my light switch are the following words. The last image these 67-year-old eyeballs see before I step in the pit every Tuesday and Thursday. It says, DK, before you stand before your children today, don't you ever forget. A poor teacher complains. A good teacher explains. An excellent teacher demonstrates. But a great teacher? Well, a great teacher inspires. And what did Maya Angelou say years from now? People may forget what you did, people may forget what you said. But no one's ever going to forget how in the world you made them feel. Somebody said it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say till he tried. Buckled right in with the trace of a grin on his face. If he worried he hit it, he started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Somebody scoffed, oh, you'll never do that. At least no one ever has done it. But he took off his coat and he took off his hat, and the first thing we know, he begun it. With a lift of his chin and a bit of a grin without any doubting or quit it, he started to sing as he tackled the thing. It couldn't be done, and he did it. There are thousands to tell you cannot be done. There are thousands to prophecy failure. There are thousands ready to point out to you one by one the dangers that wait till assail you. But with the lift of your chin and a bit of your grin, you just take off your coat and you go to it. You start in to sing as you tackle the thing. Oh my God. Spit in his face, show you Marcus Garvey. Slam the school door in her face, she becomes Mary McLeod Bethune. Write him off as another fatherless black male, I'll show you Ben Carson. Make him shine your shoes, and he turns out to be James Brown. Disobey his orders, I'll show you Colin Powell. Blind him, becomes Stevie Wonder. Rape her, she comes Maya Angelou. Deny her adequate startup capital, I'll show you Oprah Winfrey. Tell her she can't write, she becomes Toni Morrison. Tell her she can't lead, she becomes Michelle Obama. Confine him to the frigid snows of the North Pole, you got Matthew Henson. Put him in a prison cell, throw away the key, and you got two choices. You got Nelson Mandela and you got Malcolm X. And tell him or her, Saturday morning, come on man, that's sleeping day. Empowerment series, man, you're gonna be bored out of your skull. You ain't gonna learn nothing. But thanks to this brother, Clifton Johnson, he is changing the world.